on YouTube for the Rare Book Cafe. We have just moved over in the middle of our broadcast because for some reason, and we don't know what it is, Facebook knocked us off the program. We were broadcasting on our YouTube channel, on our Facebook channel, just a few minutes ago, our regular program on Saturdays, and we were knocked off. We don't know why. We will investigate that and find out. In the meantime, we have moved over to YouTube. We were planning to do that anyway. We were planning to simulcast on YouTube and Facebook, but this is an experiment. This is the first time we will be live on YouTube, on our YouTube channel for the Rare Book Cafe. And so I'm going to turn it over to Ed Markowitz, who is going to continue with the program.
All right, welcome back, everybody. A little bit of technical difficulties, but we're going to figure out how to overcome it. We're going to persevere, and move on. The next segment coming up is part 2 of our Black History, Black Heritage Month, and with one of our usual presenters, Lee Lynn from Georgia. Lee's going to share a little bit with us today about 2 Black writers you may have never heard of, Iceberg Slim and Donald Goines. You know, Lee, I wish I had a nickname like Iceberg Slim. That is so cool.
Well, he actually was the inspiration for a lot of rappers who took ice as part of their name.
Is that right? When I was a little kid, they called me. When I was a little kid, they called me Eddie Spaghetti. Oh, I'm glad that didn't stick.
And it's too bad Marky Marks is already taken, so you can't have that.
All right, Lee, go ahead and regale
us. Before we get to Iceberg Slim and Donald Goines, a little bit of background. They were both published by Holloway House Publishing Company out of Los Angeles. And they started in 1959. They were started by 2 white publicists from Hollywood. And it kind of had a schizophrenic business model. They published sleaze magazines, skin magazines like Atom and Night. But they also published some old biographies like this one of Hemingway. Though even with this one about a serious author, it says on the back, his characters wallowed in life's cesspools. They were neurotics, drunks, nymphomaniacs, drug addicts, and homosexuals. So their theme of being kind of out there, even in their serious attempts. They also did some things like this is a history of the Dodgers. And it says that you shouldn't be reading this if you can't identify the 3 men on the front. I could immediately identify Sandy Koufax. The other 2 are Maury Wills and John Drysdale. So I should have been able to identify all of them because my husband was a big Dodgers fan. But after the Watts riots in 1965 and the development of the Watts Writers Workshop shortly thereafter, they saw urban Black novels as a new direction to go. Though they started out not exactly very serious, this is their first entry into that category. Some Like It Dark. It purports to be an autobiography of a Black call girl. Actually was written by a man named Leo Guild, who advertised that he could, if you would send him recordings about yourself, he would write your autobiography for you. And he actually did a number of those. Liberace. I think he did one on Elizabeth Taylor. And he did some things on his own. Let's see. The Studio, based on, it says, give a bitch unlimited power and see what you've got. This was typical Leo Guild material. Another area that they focused on early were biographies and autobiographies of madams and prostitutes. And it wasn't until 1967 with the publication of Iceberg Slim's really autobiography, Pimp. He actually was a very, very successful and well-known pimp for a number of years. His name was Robert Beck, though that was not his original name. His original name was Robert Maupin. And Iceberg came from his steely, cold demeanor, and Slim from his very slim build. He, at the age, I think, of 42, decided he just couldn't be a pimp anymore, and his wife encouraged him to write this. It became a major bestseller for Holloway House. This is not a first. I haven't had a first in about 5 years. They're hard to come by. This is a 1980s, I think, reprint of the book. But following him, other more serious writers. This is Ghetto Sketches, which was the first book by Odie Hawkins, who went on to do a lot of work in TV and drama, as well as other books. The one thing you might recognize would be his work on Sanford and Sons on the TV show. Joseph Nizel was another major figure for Holloway House. This is one of his Iceman series. There were, I think, 7 books in that series. But he was also a serious biographer of people like Langston Hughes and Ida B. Wells, Magic Johnson, Martin Luther King, Paul Robeson. He also collaborated with Donald Owens on a book called Death for Hire. And that gets us to Donald Owens. He was inspired by Iceberg Slim's Pimp, which he read while in jail. He was a serious drug addict. He got hooked on heroin when he was a soldier in Vietnam, and started writing at a furious clip. This is his second novel, and it came out in, let me just check the dates. It came out in 1972. Between 1972 and 1974, he wrote 14 novels, turning them out sometimes in 6 weeks. They sold extremely well. The first one was Dope Fiend, Black Gangsters, Street Players, White Man's Justice, Black Man's Grief. His last book, Inner City Hoodlum, was published in 1975 after he was killed in 1974. He also had a series that he wrote under the pseudonym of Al C. Clark about a Black Panther type vigilante called Jomo Kenyatta. And this is the last of the 4 books in that series, which was also published in 1975 after he was killed. And after he was killed, what Holloway House did was to take their leftover stock of first editions of his books, leave the front cover as is, and put a new back cover on it. Now, this is a first, but the new covers, which has the picture just like this, talks about his being murdered in 1974, and yet the text block is the first edition and is identified as such, first printing, like this is first printing 1972. So you have to be really careful, because a lot of people don't notice that, and people who are selling the books don't always notice that. And so if I'm going to order a copy of a Donald Owens book, the first thing I ask is, could you tell me what's on the back cover? Because if there is the mention of the murder, which was never solved, it could have been drug related, that I don't know, but anyway, is to ask whether it's mentioned on the back, and then that's not the true first. One, when I was going through my assorted Holloway House stuff, one book I have is a fictionalized account of Joaquin Murrieta. And on the front, it says, The Hispanic Experience from Holloway House. Now, this is from 1980. I don't know if Holloway House did a series of Hispanic books, or whether this was a one-time only thing, but that was an interesting little different direction for them. The books have become seriously collected by university libraries, many who have large African American collections now have large Holloway House collections as part of that. And one interesting one that when we sold one copy of Pimp a number of years ago, one of my sons is an artist, and so we commissioned a box for the book that he painted a scene of the kind of the archetype of the pimp in the fur coat and the big hat standing in front of a long Cadillac, and lined it with fake leopard and put the book in it. And the university that it was sold to wrote back to see what I could tell them about the provenance of the box. And I said, that was very easy from the time I bought the box and handed it to my son to paint. But it was a neat presentation. Something else about Holloway House books, many of them do not survive in very good condition. Well, they're all paperbacks to start with, but they're also printed on very cheap newsprint type paper, which yellows very badly.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh.
Hello. Which yellows very badly, and so even ones that look pretty much unread, the spine is not creased on this one at all. You can tell it's got some age on it, from the yellowing paper. But what Holloway House achieved was a market for this type, particularly of this type of Black urban fiction, that bypassed both Eastern book publishers and also the company that published Black magazines such as Ebony and Jet, and sold directly to customers in cities, and made quite a name for themselves. One of their early employees was the acclaimed poet Wanda Coleman. I looked just out of curiosity on her Wikipedia entry, and the whole Holloway House thing is kind of bypassed. It says she even worked as an editor for a skin magazine at one time, and she has written about her experiences with Holloway House. So it's still in business. It's been purchased by Kensington Books, I think, but still turn out reprints of a lot of these classic ones. But they're getting harder to find. And if you have any you want to get rid of, let me know. But it's an interesting publisher with a long history, and performed a very specific and kind of special niche in the publishing world, starting in the late 60s, particularly through the late 60s through the 70s. So that's Holloway House. Anybody there?
A quick second. And Lee, you're always so extremely knowledgeable and prepared on your subjects. It's so good to have you share with us.
Thank you.
One of the things that occurs to me is that some of these books would not have been possible without the pioneering First Amendment work of Lawrence Ferlinghetti, who, as you probably all know, passed away this week, and we're going to have a short tribute to him at the end of the show. But Lee, I noticed just from the graphics on the covers of these books and from the content of these books, they probably would not have passed muster in the 40s and 50s without some of the court work that Ferlinghetti laid the ground for authors to follow him and the other beats of his stable.
Probably would not have passed through the Georgia Literature Commission either.
I don't think
so. We talked about last week.
Yeah. All right, Lee. I think our next segment this week is, are we ready for Mardi Gras? Or are we going to try the story behind the story again? Looks like we're probably going to go with the story behind the story again from Lynn Thompson and Victor Hugo.
Hi, I'm Lynn Thompson. This is the Rare Book Cafe for the last Saturday of February 2021. And this is the story behind the story, in which we look at how books frequently defy all odds to actually get published, and even more so to get noticed and become classics. And this year I want to move back a little bit in history to a 19th century author, Victor Marie Hugo, who lived from 1802 to 1885, and who in the course of 83 years lived a life so complicated and filled with conflict that it's a wonder he could write a grocery list, much less a long stack of extremely popular novels, most of which are still in print today. He was born to a general who served under Napoleon and a Catholic royalist mother. In Victor Hugo's 83 years, the government changed 6 times between monarchists and republicans. He spent nearly 20% of his life in exile. In his views, Hugo moved from Catholicism to deism, from monarchist peer of the realm to Republican senator. Yet through it all, he retained the adoration of the French as one of their greatest writers of any age. His first collection of poems was so impressive, the king gave him a lifetime pension. Hugo was 20. His first novel came out when he was 21, and he published 5 more collections of poetry through the 1830s. He could have died then and been remembered as one of the first rank of French lyric poets. At 26, Hugo published The Day of a Condemned Man, which influenced writers from Dostoevsky to Dickens to Camus. He wrote hit plays about historical figures. His 1831 novel, Notre Dame de Paris, lives on as the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Set in the Middle Ages as people struggled to adapt to whirling change, the book presents the arrival of the printing press as the death of religion and architecture by removing knowledge from its custodians and opening it to any and all. In the mid-1830s, Hugo began work on a sweeping novel of social misery and injustice. It took 17 years to finish and appeared in 1862 as Les Miserables. Critics panned it, the public loved it, and within a short time, issues it raised were being debated in the National Assembly. The book sold out in hours in most cities, backed by a 6-month marketing campaign unusual for its time. For years, the Guinness Book of World Records listed the book as the cause of history's shortest correspondence, in which Hugo, wondering about sales, allegedly telegraphed his publisher, ? The publisher, legend had it, replied, ! At 39, Hugo was given a peerage and elected to the French Academy. Voters sent him to Parliament in the new Second Republic of 1848. He campaigned for free universal education, voting for all Frenchmen, and ending poverty. He launched a campaign to end the death penalty that won him worldwide fame and condemnation. After the coup that brought Napoleon III to power, Hugo went into exile in the British Channel Islands, and he couldn't even fit in there. He was forced to leave the island of Jersey for the island of Guernsey after backing a newspaper critical of Queen Victoria. He campaigned to save the lives of Emperor Maximilian of Mexico and the American abolitionist John Brown. But when Napoleon III issued a political amnesty in 1859, Hugo turned it down. There were strings attached. He could come home, but he would have to be very well behaved. As soon as Bonaparte was overthrown in 1871, Hugo returned to Paris just in time for the Commune. He survived it by living on animals the Paris Zoo gave him and the disaster of the Franco-Prussian War, before retreating again to Guernsey in 1873. When he returned to France a few years later, he was promptly elected to the Third Republic's Senate, where he was considered an ineffective gadfly and was distracted by health and family problems. Nearly all his children died before him, and one was declared insane and institutionalized. Hugo's 80th birthday was a national celebration. The parade past his Paris home lasted for 6 hours. And when he died 3 years later, the nation plunged into mourning. His funeral drew 2 million people, and he was interred in a crypt at the Pantheon with Dumas and later Zola. He published 56 books in his life. Another 22 were issued posthumously. Few have had greater influence after death. In 1886, the Berne Copyright Convention, which created an international system for protecting the intellectual property rights of authors, went into effect. It was Hugo's creation. He was also discovered after he died to have been a first-class artist, leaving behind a collection of over 4,000 drawings, the equal of any in his time. In modern times, we've seen many works by famous writers translated naturally as films. Hugo's works were not only turned into movies, but his lyricism inspired music. Over 1,000 works to date, including over 100 operas. Rigoletto, Ernani, La Gioconda, and Lucrezia Borgia remain in the modern repertory. Music, he wrote, expresses that which cannot remain silent and which cannot be put into words. The modern-day musical Les Mis opened in Paris in 1980 and London 5 years later. For a book earlier critics condemned as popular fiction, the stage show was condemned by critics for popularizing a literary classic. It is the second longest running West End play ever and ran for 16 years on Broadway. In 1959, Charles de Gaulle's newly elected Fifth Republic government, to underline its continuity with French democratic values, issued a new currency bearing Victor Hugo's likeness. And that's the story behind the man who wrote Les Mis. I'm Lynn Thompson. This is the story behind the story, a weekly feature on the Rare Book Cafe, and I'll see you again next week.
Thank you, Lynn. I, not being either a writer or an artist, am always so impressed and overwhelmed with these Renaissance types of producers like Victor Hugo or Lawrence Ferlinghetti, who are not only prolific authors, but prolific painters as well. Sometimes the talent gets spread pretty thin, and sometimes people are blessed with such amazing creativity. Speaking of creativity, have you ever been to a Mardi Gras parade and seen the floats? I've been to one Mardi Gras in my life, and I'll never forget what an experience that was. And this week, to tell us a little bit more about the Mardi Gras that just passed us about 10 days ago, is Barbara Lowe, our specialist in ephemera. Barbara, are you back with us? There she is, looking good, Hollywood.
Boy, I'll tell you, the coincidences in the world. One of my all-time favorite books is Les Miserables. So I found that to be a very interesting presentation.
Good.
Anyway, so I thought I would share today some Mardi Gras invitations and tickets. So Mardi Gras is, most of you are familiar with it, but it means Fat Tuesday in French. And that is the last day before Ash Wednesday and the start of Lent. And basically, it was the term Fat Tuesday refers to the fact that you want to eat up all the goodies that you've got in the house, because now you're going to go into Lent where you're not going to have all those meats and sweet things around. And so it started centuries ago, and it's become bigger and bigger as time goes on. The first Mardi Gras celebration that we know of in the United States was in 1703 in Mobile. which at that time was the capital of the Louisiana Territory. And you might remember the Louisiana Territory was huge. And so that was the first one that was here in the United States. And then the capital of Louisiana migrated around, and eventually it came down to New Orleans. And that is really where we know Mardi Gras today. Most people think of Mardi Gras as just the Tuesday before Ash Wednesday. But in fact, Mardi Gras celebrations actually started on the 12th day of Christmas, which is Epiphany, and went all the way up until that Tuesday before Lent. So I'm going to show you some very early ones. It's also known it's got different names in different parts of the world. So the other thing you might recognize is Carnival. So in Italy, it's called Carnival. In Brazil, it's called Carnival. So you'll see those terms used interchangeably. And so for a lot of these places, it became a long celebration that lasted for several months. So I'm going to show you some early invitations. One of the things that you'll see, whoops, I got to get it centered there, is you'll see this character with the hat, and he might be carrying a mandolin or something like this. So you'll see that character show up frequently on the invitations. You'll also see things like the devil. Now these are from Italy. So here's another example. Here's one that actually refers to Carnival. Can you see that? And they were all mostly, as I'm about to show you, black and white one, they were mostly very colorful. And one of the big things about the celebration was the fact that they would have masked balls. And the masked ball was a big tradition where, and as you can imagine, this was not something for the poor lower classes. This was really for the upper classes. But this one is actually a dance program cover. So it would have been folded and would have the schedule of dances on the inside. In some areas, they actually started at Thanksgiving to celebrate Mardi Gras. And this is an invitation for a masked ball that actually is from the Thanksgiving time period. These took place all over Europe. This is a Belgian one. And if you can read it, it says ball mask. And so you can see it was a very elaborate thing to get the different kinds of masks. Some you held up, some went around just your eyes, some went around half your face, kind of like what you think of with the Phantom of the Opera. And some were full face masks. And part of the celebration and game was to try to disguise yourself so that nobody could tell who you were, and then try to figure out who the guests were. Here's another Belgian one. And if you look closely, again, you'll see with the musical instruments and the masking and everything. Then, and one of the things that happened with Mardi Gras was that besides the masked balls, then they would have the parades. And they would develop what were called crews that would sponsor the different floats in the parade. Now this year, because they couldn't do a regular parade in New Orleans, I don't know if you saw on the news, what they did was homeowners decorated their yard as if their yard was afloat. And some of the different crews and everything lent them their decorations and everything so that people could walk down the street and get the feeling of going from float to float. since they couldn't have an actual live parade. So what happened as it evolved and became popular is the Northeast then became a huge, and this whole series I'm going to show you are all from the Northeast, mostly New York. That one might have been Philadelphia, but and these are highly prized items for collectors. And you can actually find some, I don't have any of these, but you can actually find some where they fold and fold and fold and fold. And there might be like 8 different layers that you would open up for the invitation. I don't have any of those because those sell for thousands of dollars. But so here you have the queen of the ball. And here's another one. So obviously these tickets and events were a big deal. They put a lot of time and effort into the balls themselves and into these invitations and tickets. This one is unique because you've got the invitation to the ball, and then you have the ladies' ticket over here. And these balls were by invitation only. This was not something that a casual person could walk up and say, gee, I'd like to go to the Mardi Gras ball. You had to have an invitation and you had to qualify to do it. And sometimes that meant you paid thousands of dollars to be part of the crew and to get a ticket. So,
Barbara, can you hear me?
yes.
The thing I notice about those invitations is how colorful they are.
Yes.
Some of them going back to the 1870s. Was that chromolithograph?
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the coloring
Yes,
process?
these would be chromolithography. And this was really, I mean, if you think about it, this was the height of chromolithography, where the colors are still 140 years later, bright and, you know, I mean,
exuberant.
We don't have this technology anymore. Our printing is not this good. Because one of the things about chromolithography is if you look at it with a magnifying glass, there are no pixels. And we're used to seeing pixels on either printing or on our TV screens or whatever. And those are the little dots that give the definition. But chromolithography, because it was done on stones, the colors, when you look with a magnifying glass, they're totally smooth. There are no pixels. And that's part of the reason why the color is so dynamic. Here's one where it had the information about the ball on the back. And the printer did not get that centered. Tisk, tisk. So, but you can see that it was a big, big thing. Here's one that talks about Falstaff. And you know, so each club would name themselves and try to pick a different name that they thought would be symbolic for their organization. So that was Falstaff. This is the Oakland Club. Here's another one with a ticket still attached to it. Oops. And again, the homage to the French. You see it says a French ball. And again, I'll get this. That character that you tend to see frequently over and over. And here's one kind of with the devil, because this was kind of like your last chance for merrymaking before you went into the season of Lent.
Barbara, one more question.
Yeah.
I noticed that there's a racial characterization of some of the members in the party. Were these clubs segregated back then? I imagine they were a white club.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Did African Americans have their own Mardi Gras clubs?
Yeah, I would imagine they were
you're
definitely
aware.
segregated. I was going to say, did you see something with a
Yeah.
black in it?
Yeah, I did, but he was more of a jester
Oh,
and a
okay.
musician,
Okay. Yeah.
which is
Yeah. I think that might have been this one. Yes. Yes.
could have been,
They
yes.
were
Yeah.
very definitely segregated. And keep in mind that the biggest Mardi Gras celebrations were in the South, and particularly in the areas that were originally settled by the French. Because even though Mardi Gras is celebrated all over Europe, it's most well known for its French roots. And yeah, so they would definitely have been segregated events. You might have seen blacks there serving, but oh, here's one where there's a black. But that is highly unusual, unless that was a black function. That I'm not sure about. I've never had anybody ask me that.
Just something I
Yeah.
noticed in the photos.
Yeah. But so that's the collection of items that I have today. It's, Mardi Gras is a fun thing to look for. And you'll still see, I mean, obviously it still lives today. And these crews that were started, and crew is spelled Krewe. Crews and Mystics were the names of the organizations. They're still in existence today for, like 200 years. And people they can pay as much as $1,000 a year to be a part of a crew. And what that means is your crew is responsible for your float and your activities, your ball and whatever. And there are some crews where they're less expensive by a long shot. And mostly what you do then is, instead of putting forward a lot of money and having somebody else build the floats, is you put in a much smaller amount of money and then your crew builds the float themselves as opposed to hiring it done. But they're big social organizations in these cultures, and a lot of them still exist today. And sometimes with a crew, the only way you can get in is if your parent or grandparent or great grandparent was part of it, because they passed down that legacy, just like legacy colleges, pass down legacies. So it's a very significant event in those areas. But now you know a little bit more about Mardi Gras and what it means, and why it's not just one day, but it can be as long as 2 months.
Well, thank you, Barbara. Once again, I'm just humbled. And Lee and Sharif, you were just so intimately knowledgeable about your subjects, and your preparation for the shows like the one today just really make the value of the Rare Book Cafe that much more so. All right, our next segment that's coming in. Thank you, Barbara. I'm sorry, did you have something else,
Yeah, I
Barbara?
just wanted to add one more thing, and that
Please.
is that I'll be back in 2 weeks, and we'll be talking about the Ephemera Society annual conference and fair. And I'll have a guest with me that day to talk about the fair. And so it will be, its main focus is ephemera, but we always have book dealers there.
Okay.
You can no longer
Very
separate the
good.
books and the ephemera.
No, it's anything made out of paper.
There you go.
There we go. March 13th, Barbara will be back with us with a guest and discussing the upcoming ephemera fair. Now, as we prepare to load things found in old books, I want to give a shout out to David Hess from the Bookman Bookstore in Orange County, California. The fun thing about the Bookman Bookstore is when David posts on Instagram, the people in his posts, the people who visit his store, always have the most interesting T-shirts. And I suppose if you live in Southern California, a T-shirt's an essential part of your wardrobe, but the T-shirts are almost as interesting as the books on that Instagram page. All right, things found in books with David Hess. Here we go.
I'm David Hess from the Bookman in Orange, California. And I am here to present my weekly section on things found in used books. And so let's get started. Today, I have a group of books that came across my desk, kind of from the 20s and 30s. And inside, I found numerous stuff. I'd like to share it with you today. And this one book here called On the Cuff, written in, the book itself was written in 1944. And inside, I found, tucked into the front, a envelope, Bancroft Whitney Company, Law Book Publishers. And it's just an envelope. So it's interesting only because it was from the 44, and it is actually a law book publishing house, and also just used as a bookmark. But inside that envelope were 2 business cards. And one business card is from Broadmoor Liquor Store in San Francisco, with the old Tuxedo 53045, the alpha number for the telephone, which is something that some of us remember. I had Twin Oaks for me when I was a kid. But this is Tuxedo, Broadmoor Liquor Store in San Francisco. And then the other card, also with a number, is Strike and Spare Shop. It's a bowling store for bowling equipment. So you got your drinks and you got your bowling together in one book with the law envelope. So we got that. Book number 2 I found is called French Lyrics, published in 1923. It's kind of a textbook, so the book itself is not very interesting nor collectible, but within the book I found this item, all folded up, nice and neat. It is from Hood College. Hood College in Frederick, Maryland. Miss Yvonne Forner, or Bauer, I'm sorry, the writing is pretty small, dated June 31st, 1925. And what it is, it's a report card from Hood College. And she did very well. She got B's, 2 B's, an A B plus, an A plus, an A plus in music appreciation, an A in piano. So she did very well with the music. In French, she got a B plus. So it was in the French books. You need to study up. But at the very bottom, down here in phys ed, she got a D. So she just wasn't into the exercise. She liked playing the piano, not so much playing the softball. In the next book, we have, it's not really something found in a book per se. It's a book called The White The White Oleander, which there was a White Oleander that came out not too long ago. Big movie, they made something out of it. It's written in 2000 something. But this is something with the White Oleander from 1947. But what I found interesting in the book was the little book plate. The book plate is from M.C. Levy, manager of artists in Beverly Hills, California. Crestview number 15781. Doing a little bit of research, M.C. Levy was the manager of many big stars at the time. He was one of the biggest managers of artists in his day. He retired, I think, in the early 70s, and apparently he had optioned this book or to maybe make into a movie, which, as far as I can tell, they never did. But this was in his collection at one time. I found that pretty interesting. Finally, I found in the Principles of Animal Biology, 1920 edition. Now, I find postcards all the time. Most of them are fairly modern. This one, we'll get a close-up for you, is Main Street, Pomeroy, Washington. And on the back, it's dated 1922. And it has an inscription in there. And honestly, sometimes with this old style writing, I can translate very well. Just a remembrance will see you, I think is what it says. It's from Dan. And it went to Orange, California, which is basically where our store is. So it stayed in the neighborhood. But the other interesting thing is this 2-cent stamp, which I did a little research on, and apparently it's kind of scarce, and so I need to do more research on that one. But so you have a 2-cent stamp, 1922, and this old style postcard, very glossy, that was stuck in this book from 1920. So I think that's a real keeper. I enjoyed finding that, and thank you. It's been a pleasure. And just an idea, if any of you out there want to share something that you maybe had found in a book, you can send me a picture and a little description, and maybe we'll share one of those along with the stuff that I find. I think that would be a lot of fun to do. Send it along to info@ebookman.com. That's info, I-N-F-O, info@ebookman.com. I would love to hear from you, and let's see what you find in books. Thanks, and I'll see you next week.
There in Southern California. I had not seen that segment. I had no idea what David was going to be wearing, and there, lo and behold, the "So It Goes" T-shirt. He's such a fun guy and such a fun store. All right, here's the answer to our question of the week. 100 years ago today, 100 years ago this year, in 1921, what was the #1 book in America? And the answer is Sinclair Lewis's Main Street. Our friends from biblio.com have 8 copies of the 1920 first edition listed on their webpage, their selling site, and all of those books are valued for sale at over $1,000, with the top price of any of those 8 editions being $3,750 for a fine book in a fine dust jacket signed by Sinclair Lewis. Great. Okay, once again, sorry about the technical difficulties again this week, but we're going to be back and riding high next week. The show will be up on YouTube very shortly for you to watch the rest of it. And as we go out of the show this week, we'd like to give a little bit of a eulogy, I suppose, to Lawrence Ferlinghetti, who died this past week at 102 years old. Ferlinghetti was not only an author, a publisher, and an artist. He was also a civil rights advocate with respect to free speech. Anybody who's a book person and has ever been to San Francisco has made the pilgrimage to City Lights book. And I admit that I went there for the very first time in 1974, and I saw Ferlinghetti from a distance, from across the bookstore. Of course, I was too awe-stricken and too much in disbelief that he was there. Never did go over and talk to him. But it was just an honor to be in his presence. And he's done so much for the book industry. He helped establish the genre of the beats with Kerouac and Ginsberg and Peter Orlovsky and the rest of that crew. We'd like to take you out of the show this week with a little bit of Lawrence Ferlinghetti reading some of his own poetry.
It's a beautiful place to be born into. If you don't mind happiness not always being so very much fun. If you don't mind a touch of hell now and then, just when everything is fine, because even in heaven, they don't sing all the time. The world is a beautiful place to be born into. If you don't mind some people dying all the time, or maybe only starving some of the time, which isn't half so bad if it isn't you. Oh, the world is a beautiful place to be born into. If you don't much mind a few dead minds in the higher places. Or a bomb or two now and then in your upturned faces. Or such other improprieties as our name brand society is prey to, with its men of distinction and its men of extinction, and its priests and other patrolmen, and its various segregations and congressional investigations and other constipations that our fool flesh is heir to. Yes, the world is the best place of all for a lot of such things as making the fun scene and making the love scene and making the sad scene and singing low songs and having inspirations and walking around looking at everything and smelling flowers and goosing statues and even thinking and kissing people and making babies and wearing pants and waving hats and dancing and going swimming in rivers on picnics in the middle of the summer and just generally living it up. Yes, but then, right in the middle of it, comes a smiling mortician.